and welcome to India Sense. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's take a look at the headlines. India-Canada diplomatic spat hits a new low as Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau prioritizes political survival over growth of bilateral ties with India. We tell you why the spat shows poor judgment on Trudeau's part. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar attends the SCO summit in Islamabad amidst reports of renewal of cricketing ties between the two countries. What could be New Delhi's leverage against Islamabad? We tell you. Israeli forces kill Hamas chief and mastermind of the 7th October deadliest attack in the history of Israel, Yahya Sinwar. Will a decimated Hamas and weakened Hezbollah signal an end to the Middle East war? China constructs wall in the remote villages on its border with Nepal, indicating Beijing's intent to continue salami slicing on its land borders with Bhutan and Nepal. Will this impact India's security implications? As India gets on the tech highway, can AI be the big game changer for the Indian economy? What will it take for India to be the next AI superpower? The big story that we are tracking on India Sense, the parallel plots that are running in the Canadian and American investigations with regard to some very wild allegations as far as India's involvement in any assassination plots. And that in fact speaks volumes about how mature countries deal with differences and address issues and also ensure that their sovereign interests are not compromised and are not hijacked by any political calculations. In the last 1 year, on your screens, in fact, let me tell you, that's the timeline of the two specific but very different cases, the Pannun case and the Nijjar case. The timeline tells you that the two plots may seem to be converging, but they are not. And the difference tells the story. And that's where the difference lies between how Canada and America is approaching its relationship with India. There you can see when it comes to Nijjar, there is a lot of Trudeau. But and in the case of Pannun, it is about Department of Justice ensuring that investigations go on. In Canada, there have been press conferences by the Prime Minister without giving any proof whatsoever. Quick to score political points for an election that is still 1 year away. Diplomatic measures, extreme in fact, have been taken, all without providing any proof whatsoever. In fact, listen in to what the External Affairs Ministry had to say as far as the plot regarding Njijjar is concerned.
There is a pattern. The pattern is motivated by political considerations on the part of the Canadian Trudeau government. There is also, as we have said, there's a clear pattern to smear India for reasons best known to them.
Now, in the case of an alleged assassination of Pannun, the USA, America and India are addressing the issue at the level of investigative agencies. No sound bites, no tamasha. American agencies have submitted what they feel is proof, and there's cooperation as far as the Indian agencies are concerned. In fact, in the US, election is just 3 weeks away. But that hasn't cast a shadow over the case or the relationship. Neither Kamala Harris nor Donald Trump have made this an issue even, because governments come and go, sovereign relationships survive regime changes, and that's how they grow, prosper, and become mutually beneficial. In fact, the US and India have signed a drone deal amidst all these probes. That's 34,000 crores and counting. That's because that's how governments work. Canadian handling of the case shows the diplomatic fallout is Trudeau's doing, because he may soon be out of power and the election may be almost a year away, but Trudeau may not survive it. But his government's actions will also decide how the sovereign relationship will continue from here on. But I feel that the rocky patch may not last long, and there are 3 reasons for that. 1, Trudeau's own people within the Liberal Party want him to go. Most Sikhs in Canada don't care about the Khalistan issue. And thirdly, without Indian students and businesses, the Canadian economy will witness a major hit. In fact, under Trudeau, the Canadian economy has underperformed since 2015. There's been a net outflow of funds from Canada to the US, reversing a 15-year trend of Canadian businesses receiving large American investments. That number was $460 billion in 2022. It was $500 billion last year, expected to be similar this year as well. Pandering to Sikh separatists will not save Trudeau from the wrath of the Canadian people. High inflation, record low productivity rates, housing crisis, highest corporate tax rates in the world are all his doing. All right, shifting focus now to the first wide-angle story on the show. Dr. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, attended the SCO summit in Islamabad as tensions persist. Take a look at this report that tells the leverage New Delhi has in this relationship, if at all a thaw were to ever happen. India took centre stage at the Islamabad SCO summit in what many would call a classic carrot and stick approach. Jaishankar's presence was the carrot. The move underlined New Delhi's willingness to engage on larger issues concerning the wider region. The three evils of terrorism, separatism and extremism. Comment referred to Islamabad, and the cooperation must be based on mutual respect and not unilateral agenda snipe targeted Beijing's CPEC project. New Delhi will not let Islamabad and Beijing control the narrative or impact its strategic interests. The Indus Water Treaty, a pact forged in 1960, is New Delhi's stick and the biggest risk to Pakistan's fragile socio-economic fabric. The treaty decides how Indus River waters are shared by New Delhi and Islamabad. Till now, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab rivers have been available for unrestricted use by Pakistan. Over 80% of the country's food production depends on irrigation from these rivers. They are Pakistan's lifeline, which still faces an acute water shortage resulting in a loss of up to 1.5% of its GDP. New Delhi's demands for review and modification of this treaty could have catastrophic damage on Pakistan. While India extends a metaphorical carrot like the SCO to safeguard its wider interests, the Indus Water Treaty could be its big leverage. Islamabad was served with a notice weeks ahead of the SCO summit. The question is, how will India use this leverage for a thaw in the frozen bilateral relationship with Pakistan? In fact, India will not resume diplomacy with Pakistan, not till it gets its house in order and stops state policy of sponsoring terror to India. Pakistan's persistence of seeking a reversal of the 2019 administrative situation in Jammu Kashmir and the present fragile political situation, given that Imran Khan remains extremely popular, makes any progress on bilateral relations next to impossible. But if a thaw were to happen, viewers, New Delhi will do it on its own terms, with the Indus Water Treaty being one such leverage. On to the second wide-angle story on the show. The Middle East war has entered a new phase. Israeli forces have killed the Hamas chief, Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the deadliest attack on Israel since its inception. It's raised many questions. Does this mean that the war will now end? Does this mean that the remaining hostages would return home? Does a ceasefire look more possible now than ever before? Well, answer to that is very simple. Yahya Sinwar was one among the 1,027 prisoners that were released by Israel in 2011 in exchange for one single Israeli soldier. Right now, Hamas has 101 hostages. How many terrorists will Hamas seek for releasing to ensure that these hostages go back home? That's anybody's guess. So, which means that Netanyahu will have to make some very painful concessions and a ceasefire on terms that are not palatable to him, or if to him at least, not to the far-right constituents in his government. And that too after back-to-back military victories. Much of what Israel will do now will be to restore the deterrence that's necessary for its long-term survival and permanently weaken Iran and its proxy network. I think the war will go on. At least till America goes to polls, given the fact that Biden's calls don't carry the same weight. There may even be a possibility that Israel may use this present momentum to attack Iran for the missile attack. The Middle East will remain a war zone for the time being. There is no day after right now. Let's now move to the Top Voice segment on the show. This week we have Sandeep Patil of IBM. Listen in. I'm in conversation with Mr. Sandeep Patel, who is the Southeast Asia India head of IBM, at a time when India's technology superpowership is in focus, at a time when there are now growing aspirations about India to be a leader in AI and semiconductor. What does it mean? How soon we can get there? What all we need to get there is what we are going to be discussing with Sandeep today.
Great to be here.
We speak at a time when there is a lot of buzz around artificial intelligence, a concept that's unknown in the West, but India is still sort of waking up to the kind of possibilities it throws up. My first question, sir, how do you see the potential and possibilities that AI throws up for India, for the Indian economy?
I truly see AI as being the Naya Daur of really fueling digital India in many ways. And I'll tell you why. And whilst we might think that the Western world is ahead of the game, let me share with you some data points from a recent adoption index survey that we just did. So we did a global study to look at how enterprises were actually adopting AI. Interestingly enough, Indian enterprises, 59% of all Indian enterprises surveyed, which was the highest across all the other countries surveyed, said that they were actually experimenting with some form of AI. 27% of them basically said that they were thinking about it. So when you just take that universe, the understanding of AI is fairly significant.
Yes.
People are playing with it, are learning about it. One of the things that now I think it really needs to happen is scaling AI to its full potential.
Yes.
And taking advantage of it.
When you say 59% of the companies are already now, wanting to adopt AI in a significant manner, which are these sectors that we are talking about? What's the scale of adoption that we are talking about? Because that gives a sense of the transformation potential that we are
Absolutely.
talking.
So it ranges across the board. There's clearly, a lot going on in financial services institutions, fair bit happening in manufacturing, in retail, for example. These are all the industries that are actually trying to play with it. 59% is not thinking about it. They are experimenting with it in some way, shape, or form. So what that means is there are use cases that they are trying to try out. What has not happened though is it hasn't been adopted at scale. And when we talk to CEOs and CXOs in these enterprises, there are sort of three areas which come up as detractors in terms of them really scaling AI to its full potential. The first one is around skills. People are, sort of worried that, will we be able to scale it to its full potential, and will we have the right kinds of skills to support it? The second area that comes up is around data, and do we have the data readiness, and so on and so forth. Third, which is probably very interesting, is can we trust AI and the outcomes? And this is where the notion of responsible AI becomes very important. I think today there is a lot of AI outcomes that are delivered, but
Which
people don't.
Some of them are worrying.
Some
also.
of them are worrying,
Yeah.
and people don't know where they've come from, right? So that domain of trust and driving responsible AI, that is seen as one of the detractors to say, how do you work around that and make sure that what you are delivering as AI outcomes and what you are using as trusted AI, that is truly can be trusted.
So several aspects of this. One, you said the security bit. Second, you mentioned the scale bit. And third being the responsible AI bit, which is essentially the bias that the data has. How do you sort of reduce it, no one can eliminate it. But in terms of AI's next journey in India, what do you think should be the next key milestones that corporates need to also now watch out for as they all become large-scale adopters?
I think the whole notion of responsible AI is probably at the focus of it. Responsible AI is responsible business. And let me give you the elements of it. The way we think about responsible AI or trusted AI is threefold. One, you always have to think about AI not just as artificial intelligence, but it is augmented intelligence. It's something where you are augmenting human intelligence to make better decisions, to actually drive productivity, to do work faster, and so on and so forth. So that notion, I think, needs to be there. Second, the whole notion of data provenance is really important, which means where did data really come from? If you're using some points of data or certain data sets, do you really own them?
All right, China has land borders with 14 countries. And in the last decade, ever since Xi Jinping became the president of China, he's been trying to do what many call salami slicing, or take small parts of every country and suddenly it becomes very big, substantial. And that's exactly what it's trying to do in Nepal, where China has been claiming land on remote border villages that have high Tibetan population. Take a look at this report that tells you the extent to which China is trying to grab land in Nepal. There's trouble brewing in the picturesque snow-clad Himalayan range. The dragon is redefining its territorial limits. A splitting division has sprung up at breakneck speed where Nepal's Great Himalaya Trail ends and Tibet begins. The Humla district is one of the most isolated places in the world. Not only peripherally located region, it's isolated, but its people also find themselves divided and under Chinese surveillance. Ethnic Tibetan Nepalis inhabit this region. Thousands of them escaped to Nepal in a bid to free from the dragon's repression. They are reportedly being pressured not to display images of His Holiness Dalai Lama. A 600 feet message on a hillside reading "Long live the Communist Party" has also been carved out. The Communist Nepalese government is silent due to increased Chinese investments in the country. As China continues to target Tibetans, the community has been held hostage to the dragon's expansionist tendencies since 1951 when China annexed Tibet. Since 1959, the 14th Dalai Lama has lived in India in exile, and thousands of exiled Tibetans have followed suit, found refuge in India. Beijing's unchecked expansion is also a major strategic threat to New Delhi as it concerns the territory of Doklam in neighboring Bhutan. Doklam carries huge military advantage for India's security. The area spread over less than 100 square kilometers, comprising a plateau and a valley, is at the tri-junction between India, Bhutan and China. As China continues its assertive policies, the stakes in this region have never been higher. Time for a quick check of some of the other important stories that India Sans is keeping a close watch on. As the world's fastest growing economy, India is set to become the world's third largest economy. According to the recently released International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook 2024, India is on track to become an over $5.2 trillion economy by 2028. This means India will overtake Japan and Germany, both manufacturing powerhouses. The growing economic heft will also translate into greater strategic and military heft for New Delhi. As the leader of the global south and the only counter to China in Asia, New Delhi's growth will play a major role in shaping the new world order. Modi government's policy push will act as a catalyst to further push up these tailwinds. 53 years after gaining independence, Dhaka seems to be going back to square one, implementing Pakistan's ideology. Barely 2 months after paving the way for the return of the Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, whose infamous leader was convicted of war crimes for helping the Pakistani military in the 1971 massacre and hanged, the Mohammad Yunus-led interim government seems to be in a hurry to erase everything related to the history of the birth of the country. It has pressed the reset button. Yunus's government has cancelled all national days related to the country's liberation war, spearheaded by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman or Bongo Bandhu. The move indicates Islamization of Bangladesh with deep security challenges for India on its eastern border. The Supreme Court ruling, which 40 lakh Bangladeshi immigrants who came to Assam before 1971 were eagerly waiting for, is finally here. With a 4:1 majority, the 5-judge Constitutional Bench of India's Supreme Court has greenlit the validity of Section 6A of Citizenship Act of 1955. This means that those immigrants who entered prior to 1966 shall be deemed citizens, while those who entered between 1966 and March 25, 1971 can seek citizenship subject to the conditions laid out. The Supreme Court has also dismissed arguments of dual citizenship and said that by Section 6A, the immigrants become Indian citizens and relinquish their earlier nationality. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.